Thank you very much for that beautiful introduction. And of course, New Amsterdam actually is in the United States, so we have a connection there as well. Thank you for having me here. It's great to be here. It's great to be back, I would also like to say, at this hybrid event. 2 days ago on Monday, I was actually biking with my team through Washington, DC. We were guided around by the colleagues from the Department of Transportation and on these beautiful Capital Bike Share e-bikes. And when we approached the White House, we were actually blocked because the Secret Service wouldn't let us through. And when we were there, we realized that that was actually happening because President Biden at that very moment was signing the infrastructure bill. And of course, we realized at that time we couldn't have come to the US at a better time than this week, because a major investment in infrastructure is about to begin. 2 years ago, I also had the honor of speaking here at CoMotion LA, and none of us could have probably thought what would have happened afterwards. A global pandemic that caused a lot of suffering, that indeed caused a lot of loss around the world, a pandemic that almost brought the world to a standstill, a pandemic that questioned our way of working and moving around and of interacting. And we're still not back to normal, not at all, I suppose. We are here live, but also hybrid. And it struck me what the taxi driver said yesterday when he brought us from LAX to our hotel. He said, nothing's back to normal except for the traffic. And here we indeed have a work to do, because also in the Netherlands, traffic picks up much faster after the pandemic than public transport. So very excited to be back here in person, accompanied by a small group of, we believe, very interesting businesses. And we, of course, hope to bring a much larger group to this event next year and to this region in the next year. The pandemic, of course, has taken its toll. It has showed us what is possible. At the same time, it has showed us we can telecommute. It has showed us we can reduce traffic jams. We can reduce air pollution, emissions, and prevent time being wasted when we're in traffic, when we're commuting. And at the same time, it is, I think, noteworthy that cycling as a very resilient and healthy mode of transport has seen a remarkable growth during the COVID pandemic. In Europe, recent figures have shown that cycling increased by almost 30% compared to 2019. So this is really something we would wish to retain in the months and years to come. We also believe this is critical in our fight to an even bigger crisis yet to come, that of climate change. Because the cure of the climate crisis is actually plain and simple, reducing our CO2 emissions. And the transport sector accounts for 25% of all those CO2 emissions globally. Studies really indicate that our mobility worldwide will only grow. So the challenge of reducing CO2 emissions is even bigger when you realize that as well. Especially in upcoming economies and in cities that grow very fast, also in developing countries, of course. This is why we believe we should really make sustainable mobility one of our biggest priorities. Which brings me to Glasgow. Last week, I'm sure you're all aware of that, there was a climate summit, and your, as well as my government leaders, were there. The world gathered to negotiate climate solutions. And in addition to that, many private sector representatives were there as well. I was there also for a few days and very impressed and encouraged, I would like to say, by the US leadership shown, both at the federal level, as well as, of course, at the level of California. A lot of Californian leaders were there. And actually, in very close cooperation with California, we launched an initiative which we are quite proud of. Together with CalSTART, we presented a so-called global pledge on zero emission freight. 13 countries and regions have already joined our initiative, including California. And we've done so because for too long, we believe we've overlooked the freight sector, thinking it was too difficult to decarbonize. And at the same time, we now realize that technology is improving so fast, costs are reducing, that indeed we can revolutionize zero emission trucks that are already coming to the market. Manufacturers are investing in green innovations, supply chain operators are stepping up to the mark, and for a strong competitive future, for their companies, we really believe that investing also in this part of the chain is incredibly important. And the logic of that initiative on freight is quite simple. We need zero emissions by 2050. That is pretty clear. To meet, of course, the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement and to keep climate change intact. And at the same time, we can see that the normal turnover for fleets is about 10 years. So that effectively means that by 2040, we need to ensure that every single truck that is being sold is zero emission already. And to remain on track, we have expressed the wish to 30% of sales of these vehicles by 2030 already. So that's a joint ambition from the Netherlands, 13 other countries, including California. And we really are proud to work on that in the coming time. And this, I think, is exactly the sort of initiative we should be jointly aiming for. And let's not forget, indeed, that zero emission transport not only prevents climate change, but as you've rightly said earlier, Stephanie, it also improves air quality in cities like yours and ours. And that is, I think, is almost as important as the climate change aspect. With the pledge, I also would like to refer to the so-called Transport Decarbonization Alliance, because decarbonizing trucks and buses is part of a bigger challenge, of course. And an alliance of front-running cities, companies and countries that work to bring transportation in line with our climate goals is the goal of that so-called Transport Decarbonization Alliance. It aims to raise ambitions and scale up implementation by developing action agendas for active mobility and for charging infrastructure. For the last 3 years, the Netherlands was presiding over this alliance, and at the climate talks in Glasgow last week, we handed over the baton to California. So you will be in charge of that coalition now, and we will be proud to see the alliance grow under your leadership. In Europe, we've also had our own regional initiatives to spur transition to smart and sustainable mobility. And at present, we're negotiating with other EU member states and the European Commission the so-called Green Deal, which is a new European growth model based on circularity, renewable energy, low carbon industries, and healthy ecosystems. In the transport and mobility sector, this Green Deal aims to reduce 55% of CO2 emissions by 2030 already. And that's a mandatory goal that every single member state will have to achieve. And in addition to that 55% reduction in CO2 emissions, a policy is also included that promotes accessible charging infrastructure, because without, of course, you can't introduce EV at a bigger scale, the development of sustainable alternative fuels, emission trading schemes for air, land, and water transport are also in that initiative. We strongly believe that governments have a role to play here, not only to prevent and curb the negatives, like congestion and pollution, but also to set the scene for green businesses to experiment, to invest, and to grow. To ensure the accessibility for all goal, we suppose all of us share, the transition towards that smart and sustainable mobility should also be, and that's very important, a socially just transition in which a good functioning public transport network plays a key role. And I think you referred to this extensively in your earlier keynote speech. Cost and profit optimization of businesses should be aligned and not opposed to the interest of society at large. Public-private cooperation, we believe, is key here as well to transform to that cleaner, smarter, and different system we all aim for. Now let me turn to my own country, to the Netherlands. It might be very small on the map. It actually is quite small, but we believe great things are happening. We're developing and testing solutions to 3 of the most pressing mobility challenges of our time. And the first challenge I would like to go into is that of green mobility. With the transportation sector being responsible for such a large share of CO2 emissions, we need to reduce if we want to reach our climate goals. We have invested heavily in charging infrastructure. And now we have 1 charging station for every 4 electric vehicles. A mix of public-private investment ensured the rollout of charging stations sometimes even before the electric cars were there. In voluntary agreements with benefits for both businesses and cities, we try to ensure that the range anxiety you are probably aware of is not there, because there are so much charging poles, you always have the assurance that your car can be charged. As we are working towards decarbonization of our transport system, standard setting on cars and fuels are equally important. And here, of course, California's low emission clean car standards are unparalleled. It's great to see that these standards are now also adopted by, as I understand, 14 other US states. In the European Union, we're also working on a stricter regulation for vehicles as well as fuels, and this, we hope, will also provide a level playing field within the European Union. And it does, of course, not stop there. Some cities are piloting projects with bi-directional charging. It's a very interesting development in which the energy of the car battery can be used to charge the grid in peak hours. Some cities in the Netherlands have already built the infrastructure to accommodate this. This effectively means when you come home with your electric vehicle, your grid will actually use the energy from the car at peak hour, and then during the night when you're asleep, the car is being recharged. These are just examples we believe we should be working on and exchange experiences on. Which brings me to the second mobility challenge, that of smart mobility. Together, we spend too much time in traffic, in LA and elsewhere. And you know all about this. They are a nuisance, traffic jams, but also hugely costly for our economies. By applying smart mobility solutions, we really believe we can increase efficiency, manage traffic better, and improve our mobility systems. We are actively engaged in the safe development of autonomous driving and are always looking to cooperate with leading industry partners and leading countries and regions in the world by helping to overcome legislative obstacles, providing the right conditions and high quality assistance to enter the European market. And we believe the Netherlands is an excellent gateway to that European market. Another example I'd like to mention is the implementation of our mobility as a service approach. And take here the business district of Amsterdam. Travelers can use a mobile app to plan a trip, pay for it, track real-time traffic data, and the system offers an on-demand localized mobility scheme tailored to the needs of each individual commuter. It is based on public transport. It reduces individual car trips and thereby, of course, prevents congestion, pollution, and emissions. Let me now turn to the third mobility challenge, that of urban mobility. With ever-increasing urbanization, our cities face challenges with pollution and accessibility. We saw how, with the various lockdowns and office closures during the pandemic, how our cities transformed with less pollution, more people out on the street, cycling and walking. And you probably know already that the Netherlands is a country of bikers and bikes. We actually have more bikes than people. Everybody rides a bike, and even our Prime Minister bikes to work. The government has invested heavily in safe biking infrastructure, connected bike lanes, and a network in which public transportation is directly linked to the cycling infrastructure in the city. And in fact, this integration we experience is quite successful in a way that many cities are actually now struggling with enough parking spaces for bikes at the train stations. And this brings me to the last slide, namely a biking park facility in the city of Utrecht. And this is another solution I'd like to share with you, because we recently opened one of the world's biggest underground bike parks with a space for more than 12,000 bikes. So these are commuters going to the train station on their bikes, park it there, and move on forwards by train. And believe it or not, on peak days, it's already full. So we probably need more than the 12,000 over there. And just imagine how much space you would need to accommodate 12,000 cars in a city center at the same place. I understand that depending on the size of the car, it's probably a bit smaller in the Netherlands than it is here, but even then you would need about 80 acres of parking space, which is, I understand, more than 60 football fields. So also for your inner cities, this is a much better solution, we presume. Our work on urban mobility, of course, does not stop with cycling. We believe that transportation is a means to an end. We can reduce the need for long commutes by creating proximity. Hence, mobility is also very much linked with land use and urban planning. We work to create neighborhoods with a good mixture of housing, offices, and retail, and have the ambition of the so-called 10-minute city. This means that your daily needs, whether it be childcare, schools, supermarkets, your office, of course, the doctors, the gym, are all within 10 minutes of your house. And that is not 10 car minutes, of course, but 10 minutes on your bike or on foot. In concluding, I would like to say in the Netherlands, we aim to accelerate innovative, green, smart, and urban mobility. We cherish the saying, global challenges, Dutch solutions, and we try to do so through encouragement, through regulation, facilitating innovation, and above all, promote public-private cooperation, public-private partnerships. CoMotion LA, I believe, couldn't have come at a better time. The infrastructure bill has just been signed, and we're ready to take on the future. You, I'm sure, are ready to take on the future. We aim to do that together with you, and we hope to jointly make a zero-emission future reality. Thank you very much.